Okay, so the x values for every single key point for sine or cosine always starts with 0 and ends with what number? 2 pi. It goes from 0 to 2 pi. That's the unit circle. What is halfway through? Pi. So what is half of pi? Pi over 2. And then 3 pi over 2 is this one. Take a moment, and there's like, I don't know, a bunch of examples. Write all the x's in. Go. Write all the x's in for all of your examples. Write them all in. If you have the x's filled in, then we need to go fill in the y key points. So the y key points are different for sine or cosine. So if you have the x's filled in, then go fill in your y. What does sine always start with?
0.
Sine starts with 0. 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0, starts with 0. What does cosine always start with? Cosine starts with 1. 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. Fill all those in. We are ready to begin. So today we're going to do all transformations. Last class we only did shrink or stretches. Today we're going to do everything. So we're going to start with like a stretch or shrink. We're just going to start with the very first number, 2. What does 2 do to the graph? Or what does 2 do in the table, Peter? Perfect, both. So it is a vertical stretch by a factor of 2, and then in the table we take the y values and we multiply them by 2. And I'm just going left to right. What is my next number? It is a 4. What does 4 do? It is, but how do you know it's a shrink? Right. So when you put it in the table, it's going to be horizontal because it's next to the x, and we have to multiply by the reciprocal. Instead of multiplying by 4, we multiply by 1/4. Or you could divide by 4. That's also opposite. So we're going to multiply by 1/4. That's how we know it is a shrink. Each of my x's multiplied by 1/4. If you need to do work off to the side, I did leave you some space on there. If you need to do work to figure this out, hopefully we don't need to do 1/4 times 0 off to the side. But maybe 1/4 multiplied by pi over 2 and you multiply straight across, so I'm going to get pi over 8. And then 1/4 times pi, that's pi over 4. And then 3 pi over 2 multiplied by 1/4. So I go straight across and I get 3 pi over 8. Or 2 pi multiplied by 1/4. We're multiplying 2 pi by 1/4, we get put 2 pi over 1. Go straight across. We get pi over 2. But we get 2 pi over 4, which then reduces to pi over 2. And then we have this plus 3, and that's what's new from last time. So the plus 3 is not in parentheses. Because it's not in parentheses, I know it's an up or down. So that is a translation. Translate up 3 units. And we put a plus 3 for our y values. So when we get a graph, we only graph the very furthest out x and the furthest out y. So sometimes I accidentally look at the wrong thing, so if it helps you to cross out the ones we're not doing, feel free. Graphing the red ones and the purple ones. And for graphing this, it's going to be a little tricky. We have one kind of like this in our homework too. So what I would do is I would say, okay, I can graph 0, 3. I'll graph that one, 0, 3. And I can graph pi over 2, 3. That's the fifth one, pi over 2, 3, because that's on the graph itself. And then I can kind of figure out where everything else is. These are always evenly spaced. So the middle one at pi over 4 is going to be exactly in the middle of these 2 dots. And that is at 3. So exactly in the middle is also at 3. And then when I want to do pi over 8, there's definitely no pi over 8 on this graph, but they're all evenly spaced. So if I go exactly in between 0 and pi over 4, it's going to be pi over 8. If I go exactly in between, then I'm going to 5. And then exactly in between pi over 4 and pi over 2 is going to be 1. So I'm just halving each thing. I'm just going right in the middle. When we connect that, that's going to be 1 cycle. So you have to follow the pattern and do at least 4 cycles on each side, I would say. Bless you. You want to be careful. We don't want to mirror the points. We want to continue the pattern. We don't want to mirror the points. We want to continue the pattern. So if I was up at positive pi over 8, the next one is going to be all the way down here. And after I connect these, I'll move. It's hard for me to connect it if I'm not standing right in front of it. So I said this before when we were doing our homework. I think the most squished together ones I would give you would be this. I'm not going to give you anything that's even harder to graph. This would be the most, squishy one that I would give you. So we're going to talk about the period and the amplitude. Make sure we know how to answer those questions. So the amplitude is how far above and below that middle line the graph would go. So you have to kind of see that middle line. It's not given to you. You just kind of have to figure it out. how far above and how far below does the graph go from the middle line? 2. So the amplitude is 2. It's always a positive number. And then the period is how long one cycle is. So my very first points that I graphed were this. So it's horizontally how long it is. From start to finish horizontally, this is pi over 2. So we could look at the graph and figure it out. Sometimes it's a little harder to look at the graph and figure it out. This one's not, but sometimes it's harder to do. So if you take your normal period, your parent function period, which is always 2 pi, and you multiply by whatever we multiplied our x's by, for this one it was 1/4, that will always be your period. It's always what you multiply the x's by. So this one was pi over 2. It's always what you multiply by. Okay? Next one. So let's go left to right. Let's look at our values. The first value is a 5. What does that 5 do? It's a vertical stretch by factor of 5. It is a stretch if it's more than 1. So I'll take our y values and multiply by 5. Our next value is a 1/2. That 1/2 is attached to the x. So we're going to attach to the x. We're going to multiply, but we're not going to multiply by 1/2. What are we going to multiply by? 2. Multiply by the reciprocal. Or you could divide by 1/2, but who wants to do that? So we'll multiply all these by 2. And then we have a parenthesis, and inside of the parenthesis is a plus 3 pi. So if it's inside the parenthesis, then it's going to be with the x. If it's inside the parenthesis, it's going to be with the x. And if it's a plus 3 pi inside, what are we actually going to do with the x? We're going to do minus 3 pi, because if it's with the x, it's opposite. Same rules it has been the whole year. So we're going to take away 3 pi from each of my previous x values. I totally didn't write my stuff up there, did I? So the red one is a horizontal stretch by a factor of 2. And the purple one is a translate 3 pi units to the left. So yes, it is a translation. All right, so we're going to plot those. See, at negative 3 pi, we're going to plot 5. At negative 2 pi, I'm plotting 0. At negative pi, plotting negative 5. At 0, we're plotting 0. At pi, we're plotting 5. So this is my key points, but we have to continue the pattern. Make it curvy. So my next dot is going to be at 2 pi, and then at 3 pi. And that's all that fits for continuing the pattern. So I highlighted one cycle. You don't need to highlight one cycle. I'm just doing it for you so you can see the one cycle from the key points. We need to find our amplitude and our period. So I drew in the midline. I found the middle of the graph. Drew in the midline. How far above it or how far below it does it go? Up. So that's our amplitude. And then our period is horizontally from start to finish for one cycle. How long is it? If you can't tell visually, you can use the information. We're going to take 2 pi always, and we're going to multiply it by the same thing we multiplied our x's by, which was 2. So our period is 4 pi. Notice I did not use my minus 3 pi at all. I just multiplied by 2. Yes?
Can't you just take the table and then find out what the last one is? Like where 2 pi is and what's the period? Well, after, like, only multiplying.
Yes. And that's what it is, but when I say people to do that, they look here. So I don't want to, but yeah, you can do that. I don't want to confuse people and have them write down pi, because is pi the period? It is not. It is 2 pi times 2. Okay. All right, we're going to skip this one. Save some time. Go to example 5. All right, so let's go left to right. The first number is not, it is a negative 2. I don't know what I was going to say there. It's a negative 2, but it's 2 transformation. Remember when we have a negative in front, the negative makes a flip, a reflection. And then the 2 is a vertical stretch. So we have 2 transformations right on, right out in front. So we're going to have a reflection in the, do you remember? X-axis. And then we have a vertical stretch by vector of 2. But in your chart, it was going to multiply by negative 2 at the same time. And then the next number we come to is 2/3. 2/3 multiplied by an x. So we're not going to multiply by 2/3. What are we going to multiply by? 3/2. So here you might need to do some work off to the side. Not for the first one, I hope, but pi/2 multiplied by 3/2. We go straight across. We get 3 pi/4. Yes?
Is this a horizontal shrink or stretch?
Oh, good question. The number, is it bigger than 1 or smaller than 1? So this is going to be a horizontal stretch. Okay, so going back to multiplying, we multiply 3/2 by pi, and you get 3 pi/2. Next one, 3 pi/2, multiplied by 3/2, and it goes straight across. You get 9 pi/4. And then we multiply 2 pi, multiplied by 3/2, and we get 6 pi/2, right? Yeah, which is 3 pi. And one more transformation. We have a minus pi/2, and that is inside the parentheses. So which variable is it going to affect? It's going to be the x. And since it is a minus pi/2, we are going to add pi/2. So that's going to be translate pi/2 units right. So now I'm going to have to add together pi/2 plus what is over here. So you might have to do some scratch work off to the side. First one, hopefully not. Pi/2 plus 0, pi/2. But 3 pi/4 plus pi/2, how do I add fraction? Common denominator. So the common denominator is going to be a 4 if I multiply this one by 2 over 2. Then what will I have on top? I'm going to have 5 pi over the common denominator 4. So that whole fraction chapter is coming back again. The next one is 3 pi over 2 plus pi over 2. So 4 pi over 2, which reduces to 2 pi. What's the next one? 9 pi over 4 plus pi over 2. So again, I have to multiply the top and the bottom by 2 to make both denominators 4. We'll have 11 pi over 4. Okay, and then the last one, we've got 3 pi plus pi over 2. So I'm going to have to multiply this one by 2 over 2. I'm going to get 7 pi over 2. So I think the hardest part about filling out this table would be if you have some fractions, where you have to add them and find common denominators, okay? Graphing. These aren't the easiest ones to graph either because the fourths aren't on my graph. So I'm going to play around with this and show you how I would graph it. I can definitely graph the first one, pi over 2, 0. Pi over 2 is at 0. I can graph the middle one, 2 pi at 0. 2 pi at 0. And then the rest of them I'm not so sure about. I could probably find 7 pi over 2 if I look at patterns here. This one is 1 pi over 2, this one's 3 pi over 2, this one's 5 pi over 2. Where's 7 pi over 2 going to be? This is 1, 3, 5. It's off the graph. You probably have enough space to maybe approximate where it is. I don't on mine. But that's okay, because this graph goes on forever. So we don't even have to graph that one. I've done pi over 2 and I've done 2 pi. I've done this top one and I've done the middle one. Can I find this one?
Yeah.
It's exactly in between. These are all evenly spaced. So I can find the exact in between, and it's somewhere here. And then I just have to go to what number? -2. I just have to find exactly in between. So that 11 pi over 4 is going to be exactly in between this one and off the graph. These are all evenly spaced, so if this is like 1.5 spaces apart, then this one's going to be 1.5 spaces apart. It's going to be like right there. They're all evenly spaced. So you can find the ones that are not labeled. They're all evenly spaced. So our parent function points are not parent function. Our key points, after we translated them, there they are, and then I'm just going to follow the pattern. Ugh, that didn't look great. This one's, something's in the wrong spot. What did I do wrong?
Shouldn't it be on the negative pi or 5 pi over 2?
Yeah,
It should have
Is
been.
it that one?
Yeah.
It's hard when you're like standing off to the side to see evenly spaced stuff. Okay, then we need to find our amplitude and our period. The amplitude is how far above and how far below the midline. So you got to figure out where your midline is. The answer is what? 2. And then the period, we take 2 pi and we do whatever we did to our x's multiplication-wise. We multiplied by, what did we multiply by? 3 over 2, so we're going to do the same thing again, which we've already done, actually. It is up there. What's the answer? 3 pi is our period. All right, let's just do one more, and I'm going to have you, like, kind of started on your own, just to see that you're getting this. Let me see which one I want to do. Let's do 10. Go do 10. Try 10. What time are we done here? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong numbers. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to get done early just to give you guys like more practice time to do your homework in class. So that's why I skipped some. If you do want to do any of those or fill them out, they are already posted on the and it has the answers in here too. Pretty much we did last time when we added more information this time, so we should be good for your makeup work. Yep. So I'm going to start filling out my table. I've already put down the transformations. If you have your table, then you can start looking. Please don't just look and just copy it. I want to see if you can come up with these values and then check your answers instead. This is just practice right now. So try to come up with the values on your own and then check the answers off of mine. So I put the values in the chart, and I'm going to graph them. Bless you. Nah, it doesn't appreciate. You can do the bare minimum, it's fine. My amplitude is how far above and below the middle line. So we gotta find that middle line. It's where like the majority of the points are. The answer is 2. And then the period, we take 2 pi and we multiply by whatever I multiplied up there, which was a 4. And so our period is pi over 2. How long one cycle is. Okay, so we're ready to try this on our own.
Yeah.
Okay. I have some graphs and tables for you so you don't have to create those from scratch. It is in the book if you need to take a picture of the book before you leave. We got less time, we got like 25 minutes. So I'll pass out those graphs. The very first 4 of them are not graphing ones, they're ones where you just have to answer questions. So you can start on those while I'm handing out graphs. Okay.